Happy autumn, everyone. I've finished my second season of shakedown sailing, brought the boat home, and rather than covering it up with the tarp over PVC hoops like I normally do, I've decided to build a boat shed, which will not only house the boat itself, but the accumulation of 30 or so years of parts and miscellaneous items. So I have a few requirements. Number one, it needs to be semi-permanent due to taxation, and if I decided to take it down and move it or whatever, it would be much easier. Number two, it needs to be translucent, essentially a greenhouse that will warm up in the winter when it's freezing outside. Number three, it needs to be inexpensive due to the fact that this may not be a long-term structure. Doesn't make sense to spend a whole lot. And finally, number four, it needs to be something I can build by myself, since I'm typically by myself during the day. So the design I've decided on is called a bow shed, B-O-W, also known as the Stimson bow shed or the Gothic arch shed. And while I didn't use any plans, I did a bit of research on how these are built, and seems relatively easy. So I do have some materials laying around in the yard and in the woods that I will take a look at before I go out and start buying things. And at the very end, I will go over the list of materials that I used, as well as associated costs and the time it took me to build. And let's see what kind of materials I have stashed here in the woods. Some old 6x6s. Those are pressure treated, so hopefully they won't be rotten. Can use those. There's some old 1x3s. I could probably use those. That old piece of plywood is no good, but maybe I could use it for something. Other assorted garbage, maybe. Starting out with a single sheet of 3/4 inch thick plywood. Now I've ripped that plywood in two, put some old landscaping timbers underneath to support it, pounded a piece of rebar into the ground here, exactly 15 feet from that edge, and now I'll be just swinging this along and drawing on the 15-foot mark. So just like that. I don't know if it's showing up. There it is. And it curves just like this. And that's going to be my jig. And that looks like a jig to me. Okay, so this is the first bow in the jig. There's more than one way to make this jig. I prefer this way because this is what I'm used to, and it's actually the way I made my laminated oak beam for the mast support. So you have 1x3s on each side, also known as strapping or furring strips, and then a 2x3 block about 7 inches, spaced about 24 inches apart on center. In the center here, where there's a seam, because these are 2 8-foot and 2 8-foot, I have them just butted up, and the block is about 9 or so inches, so it gives it a little better support. One more detail is this is the bottom, and I purposely left a space here because this is going to be straddling the 2x4 ledger board as part of the foundation, whereas the other side, it goes to the top, and this will be cut on an angle to form the top of the arch. And the way I connected this, obviously with clamps, each block has wood glue on either side.
And then 2 screws going in this way, 1 screw going in that way. And now I'm going to release the clamps. Hopefully it doesn't spring back too much, but can't leave it on there for the glue to dry, because it might actually glue itself to the jig. And that's it. That's the first bow. Very minimal spring back. This is the first half of the 9 arches that I need to do. So first half of 1. So I'll need to do 18 of these bows to form 9 arches. One of the things I do to avoid the 1x3s snapping or splitting is to lay them out for a night or two, so they, especially when it's damp, so that they gain a little bit of moisture. Moisture actually helps them to bend, moisture or heat. But this is the way I've been doing it, and I haven't split one yet, or broken one yet. 2 bows, that's 1 arch. 10 bows, that's 5 arches. And finally, that is 9 arches. So one more note here. Because these are 3 inches wide, when I put the screws through this way, to keep from poking out a little bit here and ripping the plastic that I'm going to put, I ended up going on a diagonal. And then there were still some that stuck out a little bit, so I went over it with the grinder, and then I'm going to sand the outside. Also note, I did make the angle cut here, which I determined to be 35 degrees in this direction. And that's going to sit on the double ridge board made from 1x4s, and I'm going to have a few of these. I'm just going to stagger them to make one long one. And now it's time for a bit of a foundation. So I've marked out 4 corners with rebar, there and there, and measured the diagonals to ensure that it's square. So it's 32 feet that way and 15 feet this way. And now I've got all the posts cut up. And that is the extent of the foundation. So I have 6x6s, 5 on each side. The ones in the corners are sunken in about almost 3 feet, while the inner ones are probably a little over 2 feet in. And these are ones that I salvaged that I had here laying in the woods. Okay, so now I'm building the ridge beam from 1x4s, and I have 2 of them sistered together. They're staggered so that I can kind of screw them together. Okay, so I repositioned the boat so that it's kind of dead center between the foundation beams, and now I'm trying to get that ridge beam up there by myself. Hopefully I don't crack it in half. And now I've got the first 2 ribs up to make the first bow. They easily hold themselves because they straddle the beam there, resting on the first block, and just put in a couple of screws to keep it from kind of moving around, but it's relatively stable. The ridge beam cracked in half, and there was a better way to do this. I don't know why I did it this way. And that is much better. I've disassembled the ridge beam into more manageable pieces, and I was able to get the first 3 arches up. Now I need to put in the lateral supports, which are actually purlins. And that is the 3 purlins on either side. They are 2x3s inserted right into the bow and resting on the block and then screwed in. But man, what a difference. It's very rigid. Just from the addition of even one of those made a huge difference. Now 5 arches in, and it's starting to look like a structure. So the ridge beam is really probably the hardest part of this assembly. As you can see, I'm using a temporary cross member to hold together the top of the leading arch. Also, to note, these purlins, these 1x3s that I put in, it is 10 times easier if they're arrow straight. If they even have the slightest bend in them, I'm just fighting to get them in there, you know, hammering away and then trying to make sure it's level and plumb. So that's just one note. And that is all 9 arches made of 18 bows. And now my next step is to order the plastic to go over this. But while waiting for that, need to probably sand down on top of that, check all the ribs, make sure there's nothing sharp sticking out, maybe reinforce the bottom, more screws in the ridge, and then maybe prepare the inside floor. I have some old pavers and also the plywood from the jig, and maybe buy some more plywood for kind of a shop area and for a storage area. Okay, so plastic day, no wind, and my strategy here is, well, the plastic has been folded inwards towards the center on both sides and then rolled up. So I'm going to try to start over here, unroll it, and see if it falls to each side. That's the plan anyway. I don't think I'll be able to get that on video since I'm by myself. And so it went. Honestly, that wasn't that difficult at all. I've been using the boat as a scaffolding, just moving it back and forth to reach the ends. And this should work out well as long as the wind stays down. Luckily, I was able to get it fastened down before the wind picked up. So what I did was rip some 1x3s in half and just basically screwed down the ends. Probably gonna have to redo this one, work out some wrinkles. But that's going to be the basic shape here. I just need to batten down the bottom. The bottom is now fastened in the same manner with that thin batten, and I've stretched the plastic while putting that on so it's nice and tight. And also I've created this little shelf here, or rather a series of shelves to put my mast on. Just some scrap wood. It's all resting on the ground, and then I just have this attached with one screw for a little bit of lateral support so it doesn't really weigh on the frame. And the mast fits on there real well. Also, this is pretty cool. I think my flexible furler fits perfect. Literally just slides right in between the ribs there, the arches. And all I had to do was take off the drum and the top fitting. I'm closing up one of the ends with plastic, and I'm doing it in a manner that I could just unscrew the studs when I need to move the boat in and out. Just using some old wood that I found cobbled together. This is from an old garage door, these 2 long white pieces. Also did a little cutout here for the trailer tongue. That is half the plastic. Now fully enclosed on this side. Built around the trailer tongue. Also, I built a little opening. I'm probably going to put some sort of opening window. And there's the window, which is opened by that little block on the line. And easily opened from inside. Just like that. And now I'm framing the other end. I don't have much plastic left, so I'm just doing a patchwork up top. But that's okay because I do have some panes of glass that I was planning to use. These are tempered glass. They were actually made for solar panels. Finally, I'm weathered in. The varnished wood I used for this door above the windows and around that one actually came from a friend who owns a old house built in 1855. The house was built by a shipbuilder, and the irony here is that the wood from the shipbuilder's house was used to build a house for a ship. Have a look inside before I start filling it up. Oh yes, indeed, that sign says it all. Okay, so I've laid out quite a bit of pavers that I've had all the way down on this side and all the way down on this side. That plywood platform is actually the plywood from the jig that I used to bend the bows. Got a few outlets there. Hung a shop light up there. Actually, I think I need to move that back a little. And then the vents here on either side. I found it best to leave those open at night in particular because the condensation does build up. But then again, it's not quite dried out in here yet, so maybe not. And that's it. That's the end. So I'm going to get to work. I have many boat projects to do. That's not even half of it.